Welcome to another PRISMS webinar, Government Benefits 101, Understanding SSI, Medicaid, SSDI, and Medicare, as well as childhood disability benefits. My name is Allison Stefanot. I'm a PRISMS board member and an SMS mom. This webinar is brought to you by PRISMS. PRISMS is an acronym for Parents and Researchers Interested in Smith-Magenis Syndrome. PRISMS is an advocacy, education, and support organization for individuals with SMS, their families, and the professionals who serve them. A recording of this webinar and all past webinars can be found on prisms.org under the Education tab. If you have any questions this evening for our speaker, you can type them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can tonight, but we might not get to all of them. Tonight, we will be talking to Allison Schaberg. Allison has spent more than 30 years in the insurance and financial services industry. She is the owner and managing partner of Consolidated Planning Group, a holistic financial planning firm specializing in advisory consulting services for special needs families. Allison is no stranger to special needs, as she has navigated the rough waters of special needs in her own immediate family. This is one of the many reasons she is so passionate about serving the special needs community throughout her profession. Welcome, Allison. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and putting together this presentation for us. This is definitely an important topic for our community. I think this might be one of the highest number of registrants that we've ever had for a webinar. So I'm really excited to turn it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Allison. We're Allison Squared tonight, I think. So it's certainly my pleasure to be here with you this evening and talking about the very important topic, Government Benefits 101. We've got a lot of information that we're going to talk about in a short period of time, but we are going to share our slides tonight. So any links in our slides or anything that you want to make sure that you remember, you don't have to take notes of every single thing that you see, because we're happy to share those slides with you. And we absolutely do encourage people to put their questions in the chat box, because a lot of us are learning by those questions. So at Consolidated Planning Group, I run a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We are domiciled in Texas. We serve clients all throughout the United States. Our whole firm is nuanced in special needs. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. So the first thing I like to share with people is when it comes to planning for the future of a loved one with a disability, you want to work with a specialist, whether you work with us or you work with somebody else. Our situation as special needs parents is specialized, and you do want to work with a specialized team. And that's going to come to the financial planning side of the house, as well as the legal planning as well. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that. Fewer than 0.1% of all financial advisors in the U.S. have any background or nuance in special needs planning. And because it's so important that we have money in the right buckets, to preserve eligibility for state and federally funded programs, is really, really important that we get this right. We help people set up protection plans, lifetime care plans. We do a lot of transition planning. We help set up ABLE accounts, and we do a lot of advocacy by way of webinars. We have a Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to for free. And there are more than 400 webinars on planning for your loved one with a disability. If you can think of the topic, it's probably out there. And honestly, that was born out of my own frustration when I was transitioning with my own kids. I have 4 kids and 2 with disabilities into adulthood. And this is what I do for a living. I was really frustrated at why is everything so hard? Why is everything that we do so difficult? And so that's how that YouTube channel was born. And it was born to equip parents to give you the tools and resources that you need at your fingertips for free to help you implement in your planning strategies for your loved one. So tonight, we're going to take a deep dive into SSDI and SSI. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide, not too much, because we don't have a lot of time tonight. But the first things first, when it comes to government benefits, if you have felt confused about this, you are not alone. Most people are confused when we start talking about government benefits. There are a lot of terms that they throw around. There's an acronym for every real word out there. There's an acronym, and some types of benefits may have 3 and 4 acronyms that are the same. And so if you felt confused by that, there's many programs that the Social Security Administration has. So Social Security Disability, also known as Social Security, also known as SSDI. The source of payment is through the Disability Trust Fund. It's an insurance that workers earn by paying Social Security taxes on their wages. It pays benefits to disabled individuals who are unable to work regardless of their income and resources. Benefits for workers and for adults disabled since childhood must meet insured status requirements. So one of the first things that's confusing to many parents is if my child is disabled, it would only make sense that my child qualifies for Social Security disability. And that is kind of a misnomer and confusion number one. So a lot of our kids may never work, maybe they never have worked, and so they have not paid into the Social Security disability system. So therefore, they're not fully insured. Therefore, they are not covered for Social Security disability. But there's another program. This is SSI, Supplemental Security Income. So not to be confused with SSDI, this is SSI. Payments come from the general tax revenues, not the SSA trust funds. It is a needs-based public assistance program that does not require a person to have a work history. It pays a disabled individual who are unable to work and have limited income and resources. Benefits for children and adults in financial need must have limited income, limited resources. An asset limit is in general $2,000. Now, some states, Medicaid guidelines are a little bit different, but in general, for SSI purposes, it's $2,000. In most states, the asset limit is $2,000. It's not true for California. There's a handful of states that it's not true for, but the majority of the US, it is true for that asset limit. So some of you may be thinking, well, my child is clearly disabled. Why don't they qualify for SSI? Or maybe you've applied for benefits in the past and you were denied and you didn't understand why. So you may have been denied for SSDI because the child didn't pay in and they weren't insured. And if you applied for SSI prior to a child turning 18, it's based off of the parent's income and asset, not the child's, okay? So even though your child may clearly be disabled, they may have been denied for SSI because they are under age 18 and your household assets and income is over the limit, and it was simply denied because of that, not because your child is not disabled. So a couple of timelines that I want to talk about is in things that you might want to have on your radar, and various states have different waiting lists. Some states don't have waiting lists at all, but we suggest checking in your state for Medicaid waiver programs. Medicaid waivers in Texas, or HCS, Texas Home Living Class Community First Choice, and I do recognize that we have people from all across the US on here tonight. All states have Medicaid waivers. The Medicaid waivers are designed to waive off some of the cost of care for caring for an individual with a disability to keep them in home and community-based services and out of being institutionalized. These waivers, depending on the waiver, it may pay for respite care, it may pay for attendant services, various therapies, PT, OT, speech therapy, equine therapy, music therapy. It goes on and on and on, depending on the waiver. So some states have a very long waiting list. Texas happens to have a very long waiting list. Florida happens to have a very long waiting list, but some other states don't have any waiting list at all. And so you may want to check on what services are available, and maybe some of you are already getting Medicaid waiver services. Sometimes these waiver programs will pay for transition programs or summer camps or other things like that. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that. At 18, a child should qualify for SSI benefits as long as they meet the criteria. SSI comes with Medicaid. Okay, so SSI comes with Medicaid. In most states, there are hundreds of Medicaid programs within your state. but SSI comes along with Medicaid, and that is a separate program than all the other Medicaid programs. Okay, so while some families may hit the asset limit and may be under the income limit for qualifying for SSI, it is so low and it hasn't been raised in like 40 years. Most families do not qualify, and it's after their child turns 18 is when they're going to qualify. So when parents turn on their Social Security benefit or SSDI, a child will switch to SSDI under a parent's record, okay? And when that happens, after 24 months, they'll be eligible for Medicare. So we're going to talk more about that. We're going to take a deeper dive into that. But basically, there's a little provision out there that if your child has a disability that started prior to age 22, that your child could be covered under a parent's record for Social Security disability in the future. So when a parent becomes either disabled under Social Security Administration or turns on their retirement, then the child would switch over to that SSDI. So maybe first they qualify for SSI, and then later when a parent retires, they qualify for SSDI. And I just want to mention that the strategy in filing for your Social Security matters. If you're close to your full retirement age, or you're thinking about turning on your Social Security benefits, you should wait until your child qualifies for SSI first, because there are some provisions and laws that protect their Medicaid from going to that higher income once you retire. So we actually have a software. It's the only software out there that takes into consideration a parent's full earnings record, if both parents worked all of the working years, the disabled adult child, and it tells us right down to the month and the year of when you should pull the trigger on your Social Security to maximize benefits for the whole household. Now, where there's a glitch in this plan is if somebody is disabled, you can't help it. You were disabled prior to the child turning 18. One parent has passed away, so their survivor benefits might be in play. Those are things that can't be helped and sometimes are a factor, but there are still some strategies around that as well. So disability rules over age 18, SSDI and SSI. They need to have a physical or mental impairment. The disability is expected to last 12 months or more, or result in death, or result in death. They consider age, education, past work activity, and the inability to perform substantial work activity. And they also call that substantial gainful activity, and there is a substantial gainful amount, which we're going to talk about. So the substantial gainful activity for 2024 is 1550 gross per month. What does this magic number even mean? And basically what this magic number is, some people say, well, I heard that if I'm going to apply for SSI, my kid can't be working. And that's not necessarily true. They can't be working and earning more than the substantial gainful amount. If they're earning more than 1550 gross earnings per month, or 2590 if they're blind, the Social Security Administration says they're simply just not disabled. Okay, so SSI uses SGA as a measure of work during initial claims. SSDI uses SGA throughout the life of the claim. And so there are a lot of programs out there for individuals with disabilities. Vocational rehab is one, some of them. There are state and federally funded programs for individuals with a disability that have an impediment to employment. And we're certainly not against those. But just bearing in mind that if they consistently earn over the SGA, that 1550 gross per month, they lose the ability to be covered under a parent's record in the future. And we're going to take a deeper dive into that. So it's not that we want to keep them from working, because if they can work, we absolutely want them to, but we want to be careful on them messing up the future benefit of being covered under a parent's record. Okay, so SSI, looks like it went ahead. Okay, SSI benefit rates for 2024 are $943 a month. If it's a couple and both parties are disabled, it's $1415 a month, which I have not seen that very often, by the way. but $9.43 a month. So we've got people on here. Some of you may be getting SSI for your child, and you might be saying, wait a minute, I'm only getting $629 or $628 a month. I'm not getting $9.43. So if that's you, if you are on here and you're getting 600 and something, your child is not working, and you're getting 600 and something a month, what that tells me is that you have not submitted a rent agreement saying that your child is paying rent, and that you're charging the same amount that you would charge any boarder. SSI is designed to pay for food and shelter. So if there is not a rent agreement or kind of a housing agreement in place for your child, then they're going to reduce your SSI by 1/3. So that is easily rectified by a rent agreement. We have a Word document template that we use and share often for that. So that is how you can fix that. So the Social Security Blue Book, for anybody that has not applied, they're thinking about applying, the Social Security Blue Book is basically a medical impairment guide that the Social Security Administration uses to determine if your loved one is disabled. Okay, there are presumptive conditions out there that it is presumed that if a person has a specific condition, that it is presumptive and that it's going to be approved, and they may fast track those applications. This blue book, you're going to want to look up the adult listings. I mean, obviously, if you're planning on applying once your child turns 18, you're going to look up the adult listings, and you're going to look up all of the diagnosis, the primary diagnosis. If there are secondary diagnoses that come along with that, such as intellectual disability, anxiety, depression, any of the other things, insomnia, anything that comes along with or is comorbid conditions with the primary diagnosis, don't leave those out. Look them all up, because sometimes the thing that you think is going to be a slam dunk might not be. And the thing that you thought might have been insignificant ends up being what causes this to be approved. Okay, so the Social Security Blue Book. I took the Blue Book. I looked everything up for my child. Then I went to the PCP, the primary care physician, and said, listen, I'm going to be applying. They're going to be, seeking medical records, and they're going to be looking for proof. It tells you in this Blue Book what evidence they're looking for. And I just want to know in the records, if you sent the records today, does this record show that, does it show proof of that? And so, and in my example, it didn't, it wasn't clear. So I asked them, I asked them to just make sure that the record was clear and that it needed to, to depict these things. And this is kind of, counterintuitive from what we know, because most parents, most adults, they go to the doctor, and if there's something wrong, they tell the doctor, don't write that down. Well, this is kind of the opposite when it comes to our kids with a disability and getting them approved for SSI or government benefits. We need to be clear on what the diagnoses are, how it affects their activities of daily living. Can they do the activities of daily living without assistance? Those are all things that need to be clear in the record. So what should you apply for and when? I apply for SSI the month of your child's 18th birthday. Appointments should be scheduled a few months in advance for after they turn 18. Cannot stress that enough. If you have the appointment actually before they turn 18, it could be one day before they turn 18. It's going to be based off of the parent's income and assets. The probability of your child being approved is probably slim. They're going to get denied, and then you're going to have to go through the whole process over again. So unless you truly meet the income and asset requirements, it is a waste of time to apply prior to turning age 18. Okay, so they have a tool online where you can basically state your intention to apply. They launched this like about a year and a half ago, and it literally takes 5 minutes. You go on and you say that you want to apply. It takes 5 minutes. You're simply stating your intentions. They say, thank you. I understand that you want to apply for SSI for little Johnny, and somebody from our office is going to be giving you a call in the next few weeks. In the next few weeks, they're going to call you, and they're going to call you to schedule your appointment, not to take the application at that time. So this will save the date of the application, and when benefits are approved, it will be backdated to that date. Okay. So you're going to want to have evidence that demonstrates that the child's disability began prior to age 22. to qualify for the childhood disability benefits, formerly called DAC. So for like 40 years, they called it DAC, disabled adult child. And then I jokingly say, then one day they said, I know, we're going to change the name to childhood disability benefits. So sometimes they still call it DAC. Sometimes they call it CDB. Sometimes they call it survivor benefits or Social Security disability benefits under a parent's record. Sometimes they call it Social Security, so it's very confusing. But they never call it SSI. That is not supplemental security income. So getting ready for your application, you're going to gather the medical history. I say make a folder on your desktop and slide these Word documents in, the names, address, and phone numbers of the doctors, names of any diagnosis and approximate dates of and year of when they were diagnosed. So all that diagnosis history, medications, they want to know the names of the medications and what they're for. They don't care about the milligrams, but names of medication, what they're for. If they have an employer, if they have worked, any information about the employer, name, address, and phone number, pay stubs, last 3 months of bank statements if your child has a bank statement. If they have an ABLE account, this is another statement that you're going to want to include. And again, I do suggest chatting with the PCP first and reviewing what records that they would send over. It definitely does make a difference. Now, every state is a little bit different, so I can't speak for everyone. Right now, decisions in Texas are taking over a year. I will say that I think Texas is right on the top of the heap of the biggest mess and behind as far as their applications. They're understaffed. There's a lot of things that are going on, but decisions are taking a long time, much longer than they used to prior to COVID. After your local office has finalized your application in Texas, that's going to go to Disability Determination Services, which is in Austin. Most states have a disability determination service that's probably going to be in your state capital. They request and review your loved one's medical records. They're looking for evidence of a disability. They're going to all of the primary care that any of the specialists that your child sees, they're going to request all of those records. And the local disability determination office can be called, and you can find out where they are in the process and what records they have received and what they are pending. I've actually seen people's applications denied because the doctor never sent the medical records. So that is a real thing that does happen from time to time. It's not because your child isn't disabled, it's because somebody dropped the ball. So following up and following through on this process is going to be important. And then from one parent to another, I would tell you it's just really important to go ahead and put your patient's hat on. Anytime you're dealing with any government entity, whether you're dealing with a Medicaid agency of your state, you're dealing with Social Security administration, patience is going to be important when you start working on this. So what is a presumptive disability? So a presumptive disability is something that they allow a compassionate allowance for. So this link here is will take you guys to the compassionate allowance. There's over 300 conditions that are allowed for compassionate allowance. And basically, if there's a likelihood that Disability Determination Services is going to approve the case, then they may fast track the application. So here are some examples of presumptive disability: cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, intellectual disability with the complete inability to perform activities of daily living. So IDD in itself is not enough. It's not presumptive. It doesn't mean that they won't be considered disabled. Autism is not enough. And they're submitting new conditions all of the time that would be considered a presumptive condition. So what about your child? What if they're working? What if they're in this vocational rehab program that I was talking about, or any of the other get to work programs for individuals with a disability? In a moment, we're going to talk about how SSI is affected if they are working. But before we get into that, let's take a question, Allison.
So here's the question. So just to confirm, SSDI is pursued when the parent retires. Does the recipient need to have a bank account established to receive payments for SSI or SSDI? And does the bank account need to be established before SSI meeting after 18th birthday?
So it can be established anytime. There does need to be a bank account established for the SSI to go to, and a lot of families are going to be applying to be the representative payee for your loved one with a disability. And so usually what happens is the parent that is going to be the representative payee would establish a bank account in the parent's name, and they may call it the parent's name rep payee for the child's name, and that's where the SSI would go. And so yeah, I've seen parent, like for me, for my kids, we had a bank account established. I was on the account with them prior to them turning 18, and that was fine. I have many families that establish it at 18 when they apply, once they get approved, any of the timeline is going to be okay. Okay, so working does affect SSI. I think actually I wanted to just pause for a second. So when we're applying, so when a parent is applying for benefits, they would either be applying for Social Security disability under their own record because they're disabled, or they're turning on their Social Security retirement benefits. It's the same program, right? So it's one or the other, depending on what the circumstance is of the family. But usually these kids have qualified for SSI first before they're switching over to SSDI under a parent's record, or basically Social Security under the parent's record. And again, it's called DAC, Disabled Adult Child Benefits. It's called CDB, Childhood Disability Benefits.
One more question for you while you're still on this topic. The question is, if payments are backdated 6 months to a year, that's a big chunk of money to receive at one time. How does it work with that much money when trying to stay below the $2,000 asset level?
Yes, that's a great question. So they're not going to give you a giant lump sum and then cancel your Medicaid. So basically, when you get these lump sums, they do break it up and over 3, 6, 9 month period. It's still a lump sum. It's still more than $2,000, but the letter will tell you when you get it that you have 9 months to get it out of your child's name. So you can spend it down. You can move it to an ABLE account, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. But they give you 9 months to get that down. That's a great question, because it's like, first I went through all this trouble to get this approved. Now I got it approved and they gave me the back pay, and now they're going to pull the rug out from under me as soon as they give me the back pay because I'm over $2,000. So luckily you do have that grace period on that. Okay, so as far as working and SSI benefits, your SSI is reduced if the individual is working. So for example, if an individual is earning $1,200 gross monthly earned income, there's a $20 general exclusion. There is a $65 earned income exclusion. So overall, they're going to reduce the $1,200 by $85. They're going to divide by 2, and countable income is going to be the $557.50. So they would take the $943 a month, which is the SSI. They're going to subtract the $557.50, and then payable 2 months, basically not that next month, but the following month, is going to be $385.50 in SSI the following month. Okay. So one thing that you need to know about as a parent is if you have a student who is between the ages of 18 to 22, and they're regularly attending school. They could be homeschooled, they could be in college, the university, grades 7 to 12 for at least 12 hours a week, in some type of training course to prepare for employment, 12 hours a week. You can ask for a student earned income exclusion. And basically, between those ages of 18 and 22, if this is applied to the record, if your student is working, their earnings during that time period will not reduce their SSI. This is not automatic. You have to ask for it. They don't tell you about it, but it is the Student Earned Income Exclusion, also known as the SEIE. Unfortunately, they have acronyms for everything, but Student Earned Income Exclusion is important to know about. Okay, so let's talk about the Social Security Red Book. This serves as a general reference guide about employment-related provisions for Social Security, disability, and supplemental security income programs. So it's one book. It's called the Red Book. Some people say, well, you talked about the Blue Book and you talked about the Red Book. What about the Black Book? There is no Black Book with the Social Security Administration. So there's the Blue Book, which is the medical impairment guide. There is the Red Book of, hey, I'm thinking about my child working and I want to know how their working will affect either SSDI benefits or SSI benefits. The Red Book is going to be your friend. The other thing I like to mention, this is not in my slides, there's free counseling. So if you're thinking about your student going to work, there are benefit subject matter experts, and you can say, benefit counseling. You can go on the Social Security Administration website and say benefit counseling, and they'll provide names of services, free services for benefit counseling. If your child is connected to vocational rehab, they also have subject matter experts, so you can ask your counselor about that and they can get you plugged in for that. So that way you want to make intentional steps so you don't mess something up that you didn't intend to. So one important matter that we got to talk about is child support. In a lot of cases, when we have a kid with a disability, the child support may continue post age 18 for the individual with the disability. Prior to applying for SSI, it's going to be important that you work with an attorney to get that child support redirected to a first party special needs trust. If you apply, even though the parent is getting the child support for the benefit of said child, they count that as income to the child, to the adult child. So if it's going to continue post age 18, that income counts against them for SSI purposes, and it will count basically 1/3 of the monthly child support payments are excluded from countable income, but the remaining 2/3 of the monthly child support is countable. So if child support is not redirected to a first party special needs trust, it will be counted against them for SSI, and in many cases they will not qualify for SSI. So if this is you, you're going to need to work with a child support attorney, and you're going to need to work with an estate planning attorney. The estate planning attorney is going to set up the first party special needs trust. The child support attorney is going to get it redirected to that trust. The estate planning attorney doesn't do child support matters, and the child support attorney doesn't do estate planning matters. So that's unfortunate. But honestly, if it's the same money and the person has to pay regardless, it's a lot easier when everybody just agrees, and it can go pretty smoothly. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about that. So to be entitled to RSDI, Retirement Survivor Disability Income, SSDI, so we got retirement, survivor, and disability insurance. The individual is 18 years of age or older. The disability began prior to age 22, or they're a dependent of the insured worker. They're not married, and they have not previously performed substantial gainful activity, or as we learned earlier, that was $1,550 gross earnings per month. Okay. So here is the important aha moment. Drawing from a parent's record. I've kind of hinted along this evening that when we have a child whose disability started prior to age 22, when a parent turns on either their Social Security disability or their Social Security retirement, that disabled adult child is entitled to 50% of the parent's record. So for example, if my benefit is $4,000 a month, I have a child, an adult child with a disability whose disability started prior to age 22. She's been clipping along. She's been getting SSI. Now I retire. She's going to move over to those CDB benefits that I was talking about, 50% of my benefit. She's going to stop getting that $943 a month of SSI. She's going to start getting $2,000 a month because my benefit's $4,000. She's going to get $2,000. My benefit is not going to be reduced. This is going to continue for as long as she remains disabled and as long as I remain alive. Upon my death, her benefit amount is going to be 75% of the deceased parent's Social Security. And after 24 months, then the individual would be eligible for Medicare. So they were eligible for Medicaid first under SSI. If they were eligible for Medicaid first, when they switch over to this childhood disability benefits and have a higher income that would otherwise disqualify them for Medicaid, there are laws and provisions that are going to protect their Medicaid. They're going to get to keep Medicaid. Now, in some states, a lot of states are a mess. You may have to reapply for Medicaid, but they're a protected class and they're going to get to keep their Medicaid. And after 24 months, they're going to have Medicare. So they'll be dual eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. Okay. So the only thing that I want to mention here is to be aware of family maximums. If a non-working spouse is also drawing from a spousal record, or if there's more than one child in the household with a disability, there is a such thing as a family maximum, which is a range of 155 to 188% of the PIA, so the primary insured amount, basically. So it's a calculation that's clear as mud. You can check it out on the Social Security website, but there is a such thing as a family maximum. So if the math doesn't work out perfectly to the 50% or the 75%, then that tells me you might be hitting that family maximum. And our software tells us a little bit more about those types of things as well. So how to protect your child's benefits. You want to make sure that you have assets and your child's assets in the appropriate buckets. You want to ensure that your special needs family member is not set up as a beneficiary on any life insurance or investment accounts or bank accounts. You don't want to name them directly as a beneficiary. I'm going to say that one more time, because if there's a crowd of more than 5, more than half have named their disabled child as a beneficiary. It's very important that we don't do that. Because if we do, then they get money more than $2,000. It counts against them. They lose their Medicaid, they lose their SSI. So the right way to leave money to an individual with a disability is to the third-party special needs trust for the benefit of said child, and then it will not count against them. So, and we also want to have intentional conversations with any aging family members about this, because they love their grandkids, they love, whoever they want to leave, they want to help, but they don't realize naming the child outright is not helpful. It will hurt them in the long run from a benefit perspective. So when it comes to the right buckets, there's a couple of places that we can have money. Is a special needs trust. We talked about a first party special needs trust. That is the kids' money. It could be from a lawsuit. It could be child support. It could be money from earnings. It's their money. First party special needs trust has a Medicaid payback. A third party special needs trust is how we leave money to the child. There's no Medicaid payback. This is life insurance proceeds, assets when we're gone, how we're going to fund their care in the future. And then the third place that we can have money in excess of the $2,000 that won't be counted is an ABLE account. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So basically, ABLE account is not going to jeopardize SSI or Medicaid. And I'm just going to get to the brass tacks of an ABLE account. We have entire presentations on ABLE accounts, special needs trust, you name it, all on our YouTube channel. But an ABLE account is under the tax code 529A for ABLE. It's achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. It kind of acts like a Roth. It's not a Roth, but it's after-tax money that goes in. Anybody can contribute to an ABLE account for your child. They can only have one ABLE account. It's subject to the gift tax exclusion. So right now for 2024, the amount is $18,000 a year can go into an ABLE. An additional $14,580 up to their full earnings amount if they're working. But we don't ever want this ABLE account to go over $100,000. If it does, they'll disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. And then the other reason is that we can't leave life insurance proceeds to an ABLE account. You can leave life insurance proceeds or assets to a special needs trust, but you absolutely cannot do that with an ABLE account. In order to establish an ABLE account, the disables the individual disability really needed to begin prior to age 26. However, that age is going up to 46 in 2026. Okay, so what you can pay for out of an ABLE account, if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. The terms are really broad of what you can pay for. So it can pay for it can pay for housing, rent, mortgage payments, debt service. So right now, a special needs trust, you may have heard, a special needs trust can't pay for rent or food and shelter, and that's not true. A special needs trust absolutely can pay for rent, food, and shelter, but if your child is getting SSI and a special needs trust pays for rent, the food part is going away. It did go away October 1st. It finally went away. But if you're paying for shelter out of a special needs trust, there will be a 1/3 reduction to SSI. We'll put you back down to that 628, 629. Okay. So there's not very many things that an ABLE account can't pay for. It can pay for higher education. It could pay for education, legal services, professional services, financial services, transition programs, co-pays. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So we have several lists, of what to do and what not to do. But basically, if your child's getting SSI, we suggest that you don't pay for monthly debt service out of a special needs trust. You would do that out of an ABLE account. You can move money from a special needs trust to an ABLE account, from a special needs trust to an ABLE account, vice versa. You can go back and forth with that. You can move money from where the SSI comes into to the first party special needs trust or to the ABLE account as well. And sometimes that whole, movement of money is clear as mud. But the bottom line is what you need to know for planning is a special needs trust and an ABLE account work beautifully together, and you need both for different reasons. Okay, we need the special needs trust because this is how we're going to leave and provide for the future of our loved one. You can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust. You need an ABLE account because an ABLE account can pay for food and shelter without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. And money in the ABLE account grows tax-free, and there's tax-free distribution. So there's a lot of features in there that make it a little bit more desirable. So thinking about when it comes to special needs planning, who's going to care for your child when you no longer can? These are things that are emotional conversations. We're all good until we're not good. I call them wheels on the bus moments, wheels off the bus. And it's like when the wheels are off the bus, they're really off the bus. So planning, when you're of sound mind, when you're not in the middle of crisis, of what does the future, future care plan look like, it's going to solve some of those questions that you may have. Thinking about post-high school educational options, vocational options. When I think about that, I think of everything being so encompassing for so many years, and then post-high school, there's nothing. What we're trying to avoid is people leaving the school setting, whether it's private school, public school, I don't care what kind of school it is, but they're coming home and they're doing nothing. Not, in some type of transition program or growing or learning. And I like the word community, having a purpose. Maybe they have a job, they have friends. I think that that's all going to be really, really important. We want you to start touring transition programs, partial care, full care, residential communities. Waiting lists can be very, very long, so you want to plan early. There are places that will take waivers, Medicaid waivers. There are places that are private pay. The ones that take the Medicaid waivers, the waiting lists are typically much longer. So you want to plan accordingly and get on those lists. And we suggest make careful considerations before naming siblings as a future caregiver. We know that siblings care, but just as we had hopes and dreams and goals and desires, did you want to go to college? Do you want to get married? Did you want to have a home? Or, we all had hopes and dreams. Your other kids do too. And we don't want it to be an obligatory relationship just because they love the family. We want them to be able to achieve their hopes and dreams as well. Maybe they're going to be a future trustee of the trust that's going to help organize care for your loved one. those are some things to think about. So these are some things to keep on your radar, and I think we're at a perfect time for any questions. I'm happy to take any additional questions.
All right, Allison, I do have one for you. The question is, can SSI payments be moved into a special needs trust?
It can only be moved into a first-party special needs trust. It cannot be direct deposited into a first-party special needs trust. But once they're paid, it could go to a first-party special needs trust because that is the individual with a disability's money. It could not be moved to a third-party special needs trust. It's a great question.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, if parents are in the fortunate financial position not to need government benefits to support their IDD adult child, do you still recommend applying for benefits? And if so, why? And which benefits are most important to seek early?
So, like, I could argue that, with my kids with disabilities, like, is the 943 a month worth it to me? And I would sometimes argue maybe not. It's because it comes with a source of frustration. There is, I mean, it's not easy, right? But what I would say as a firm, we have, predominantly worked with families that have done well. They've got group benefits through their employer. I don't need Medicaid. Medicaid's not great. I'm not going to take my kid to Medicaid doctors anyway. My doctors, our specialists, are not on the Medicaid list. Medicaid pays for a lot more services than just that, the doctor being in network. A lot of hospitals are in network. It may pay for attendant services or respite services. And some of these Medicaid waivers, there's a Medicaid waiver in Texas. The budget is $370,000 a year per individual, depending on their level of need. So one can argue that keeping them Medicaid eligible is certainly not going to hurt anything, and it will slow the bleed on the assets in the special needs trust or the other areas. Now, we've had people on the Forbes list before that clearly could say, it seriously doesn't matter. Maybe we don't care about this. And even if we never ever got a penny from Medicaid or the Social Security Administration, it just really doesn't matter. It's not to me, it's not even the 943. It's the fact that as a parent, you've paid in, they're going to be able to be eligible under your record. So that benefit may be $2,000 or $2,500 a month. And I would say over the lifetime of your loved one with a disability, that's a lot over a lifetime. So it's kind of a dependent on what is important to you, but those Medicaid waiver budgets can be huge.
Great. Thank you. Okay, the next question is, do you expect the $2,000 maximum asset level imposed by Social Security in order to qualify for SSI benefits to increase in the near future? I believe the same maximum amount has been enforced for more than 40 years.
Yeah, it has been in more than 40 years. It's absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And there's been some proposed legislation to raise it up to $10,000. It has never passed. I could say I'm hopeful, but I don't know that I'm optimistic that it's going to pass in the near future. It has been being talked about for several years. It's not new, and by the time they approve the $10,000, it's going to be obsolete too. So, but it hasn't happened yet. But we have been making some strides in other areas with the Social Security Administration. The fact that they struck food off the list this year was a big deal because they were paying people for food and shelter, right? Like, everybody's got to eat. Come on, folks. And so they finally got rid of the food. And that just took place October 1st. They got rid of it about a year ago for it to take effect October 1st of this year. So that actually just happened. So some things are moving. So I remain hopeful that that will change soon, because clearly $2,000 isn't enough.
Great. Yeah, hopefully that will change soon. Thank you. So, all right, the next question is, if a child starts receiving DAC or CDB benefits, are they still restricted on earnings?
if they're receiving CDB or DAC benefits, they can work as long as they do not earn more than 1550 or whatever the substantial gainful amount is for the year, for that month. Every year it changes. So this year it was 1550. I forget what it was last year. It might have been like 1490 or something. I don't know. But it changes every year. So if, as long as they're not earning more than 1550 gross earnings per month under the CDB benefits, A, their benefit is not going to be reduced, and B, they're not going to be kicked off benefits. If they're working and they earn more than the substantial gainful amount, it's for the life of the claim for disability. So the Social Security Administration can deem them no longer disabled. So it's important to keep it in bounds with that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can funds left in an ABLE account after a person with special needs dies be inherited by another younger sibling?
Funds in an ABLE account can be transferred to another disabled family member. There is a Medicaid payback on the ABLE account, and that is the calculation that you can look at on the Social Security Administration. It's like, how is the Medicaid payback calculated? Again, it's kind of fuzzy on how that's calculated, but basically any remaining balance in the ABLE account after the Medicaid payback calculation would go to the estate of the individual with the disability, and how that is distributed would be up to your documents.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is, how does 529 account money impact SSI and Medicaid?
It doesn't. That's the whole point. 529C, let me back up. I get where they're going. So there's a 529A for ABLE, and then there's a 529C for college. And so I think what they're asking is, if I have a 529C for college and I'm the owner and the kid with the disability is a beneficiary, how would that impact SSI and Medicaid? And the answer is that it won't, because the parent is the owner, the grandparent is the owner, and if they pay benefits to the higher education institution for said child, it won't count against them either. But if they paid money from the 529C directly to the kid with the disability, then you have a problem. Okay, that's a great question. And then, of course, the 529A absolutely doesn't count against them, period. It just doesn't.
Perfect. Well, I think that was our last question and all the time that we have for questions this evening. And thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. This is such important information for families with special needs. I know I'm going to watch it probably multiple times. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us tonight and all of this great information. And like Allison said, we will share her slides. And she has a wealth of webinars also that you can tap into on her YouTube channel.
We're going to have a link in our slides. It's going to have a link to the additional webinars that are coming up that they can register for. And we try to title them intelligently so you can know exactly what it's about, see if it's something that's kind of on your planning journey and what some of the things that you are thinking about. So definitely check that out. We work on a collaborative team here at CPG. We stand ready to talk to you and go deeper with you on your planning journey and kind of what you've done so far, what questions that you have. Some people have done a lot of planning and they just want a second opinion. Maybe their planner has no background in special needs. Some people are just getting started. Some people need to pick up where they left off. And what I always just want to say is, don't beat yourself up. It's not about what you haven't done. It's about moving forward. It's about kind of taking the next steps and, kind of organizing, where do you need to go from here? This is a lot. It is a lot. I mean, trying to just kind of take in these government benefits, but that's just one small thing on the scale as parents of what we're dealing with, and the forms that we're having to fill out, and keeping the kids in high school post age 18, and all of these other moving parts. It's a lot. So we're definitely here to help, and we definitely get it. So Allison, it's certainly been My pleasure being here tonight. I appreciate the invitation, and we're happy to help any way that we can. And we'll look forward to partnering with you again in the future.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our attendees this evening. We hope to see you on future webinars. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. Also, please join Prisons, become a member if you're not already a member. Membership is free, and it's the best way to stay up to date with all things SMS. Prisons is a nonprofit organization. All of our programs, including our webinar series, are fully funded by our donors. So if you would like to support Prisons and the many programs it provides to the SMS community, like our webinar series, conferences, peer-to-peer support, SMS clinics, the patient registry, and much more, you can scan the QR code on the screen and it will take you to our donation page. So this concludes our webinar for this evening. I hope everyone has a great evening and good night.